He was the perfect heir, shaped to live under the weight of a legacy and suffocating expectations. She, an ordinary woman, yet extraordinary in her authenticity and courage. An unexpected encounter in a bookstore brings together two opposite worlds, challenging prejudices, traditions, and the power of family control. This is a story about love, freedom, and the strength to break barriers for what truly matters. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the office on the 30th floor of the Montgomery Tower, one of the most imposing buildings on Michigan Avenue. Ethan Montgomery adjusted his Italian silk tie in front of the mirrored glass. Reflection, gazing at the city that stretched as far as his eyes could see. At 32, he was the perfect example of what was expected of an heir to the most influential family in the country's real estate business. Impeccable in his custom-tailored suit, meticulously groomed hair, and a posture that exuded power and sophistication. "Mr. Montgomery, your mother is on line 3, announced his secretary through the intercom. Ethan took a deep breath, mentally preparing himself for yet another of Eleanor Montgomery's daily calls, the matriarch who controlled not only the IC family business, but every aspect of her children's lives with an iron grip. "Good morning, Mother," he replied, maintaining the formal tone that characterized even the most intimate family conversations. "Ethan, darling, I need to confirm your attendance at the charity dinner tonight. Isabella Harrington will be there, with her youngest daughter, the one who just returned from London. It would be an excellent opportunity for you two to get to know each other better." It was always like this. Every social event was a carefully orchestrated opportunity by his mother to introduce him to some suitable prospect she deemed worthy. Wealthy, from a good family, and most importantly, malleable enough to fit into the plans she had for the future of the Montgomery dynasty. "I'll be there, Mother," he replied automatically, as he always did. There was no room for refusal in the Montgomery vocabulary. After hanging up, Ethan loosened his tie slightly, feeling the familiar weight of loneliness that followed him even in the busiest of settings. His office, adorned with expensive artwork and exclusive designer furniture, was more a symbol of status than a space of personal comfort. The afternoon dragged on with meetings and spreadsheets until his phone rang again. It was Sophia, his younger sister, and the only person in the family who seemed to understand his discomfort with their pre-programmed lives. "Ethan, I can't take it anymore. Mom is insisting that I take over the marketing department at the company, but you know my dream is to open my own art studio." "Sophia, take a deep breath. We've talked about this before. Sometimes we need to make sacrifices for the family," he replied, repeating the words he had heard so many times throughout his life. "Sacrifices? Is that what you call this life you're living? Ethan, you don't even smile anymore. When was the last time you did something because you truly wanted to and not because it was expected?" Sophia's words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. She was right. He couldn't remember the last time he had done something purely for pleasure. His days were an endless sequence of social engagements, business meetings, and carefully orchestrated public appearances to maintain the family's impeccable image. After work, he decided to do something different. Instead of heading straight home to prepare for the charity dinner, he asked his driver to drop him off on a street in Lincoln Park. He needed a few minutes of peace away from the watchful eyes that constantly followed him. Walking aimlessly, he came across a small bookstore on the corner. The simple display window showcased a few used books and a handwritten sign announcing a literary cafe for the weekend. Something about that simplicity drew him in. He pushed the glass door open, causing a small bell to chime. The atmosphere was cozy, with antique wooden shelves reaching up to the ceiling and the comforting scent of books and coffee in the air. Among the shelves, a woman was organizing some volumes. She turned when she heard the bell, and their eyes met. It was as if time stopped for a moment. She had honey-colored eyes that seemed to glow with their own light, her brown hair casually tied up in a bun, and she wore an apron with the bookstore's logo. But what caught his attention the most was her smile. Genuine, warm, completely different from the artificial smiles he was used to. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carrying a musicality that made him momentarily forget who he was and where he was. I'm just looking," he replied, feeling strangely nervous like a teenager. "Feel free to browse. If you need any recommendations, just let me know." "My name is Olivia," she said, turning her attention back to the books, but not without giving him one last curious glance. Ethan wandered through the shelves without really seeing the titles, his mind focused on the way she moved among the books, with evident familiarity and passion. It was as if she belonged there, as if every book was an old friend she knew intimately. His phone vibrated, reminding him of the charity dinner. Reality was calling him back, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the urge to resist. He looked at Olivia once more, who was now assisting an elderly gentleman with the same kindness she had shown him. Leaving the bookstore, Ethan knew something had changed. That brief moment of connection, however superficial, had awakened something within him that had long been dormant, the desire to be more than just the Montgomery heir. The charity dinner unfolded like all the other social events in Ethan's life. Calculated smiles, shallow conversations, and his mother, Eleanor, strategically positioning him near the young Isabella throughout the evening. But his mind kept wandering back to the small bookstore in Lincoln Park and Olivia's genuine smile. The next morning, breaking from his usual routine, Ethan decided to stop by the bookstore before heading to the office. Dressed in an Italian suit that undoubtedly cost more than all the books in the store combined, he felt oddly out of place as he entered the establishment. Olivia was behind the counter, engrossed in a thick book. When she looked up, a smile of recognition lit up her face. "The mysterious customer is back," she said, closing the book. "Do you need any reading recommendations today?" Ethan felt his usual defenses lower in the face of her refreshing informality. "Actually, yes. It's been a while since I've read something for pleasure. Let me guess. Too busy with spreadsheets and meetings," she teased, studying him with a keen gaze. "Is it that obvious?" he laughed, surprising himself with how natural the interaction felt. "Well, the Armani suit kind of gives it away," she winked. "But don't worry, I have the perfect remedy for executives who've forgotten what it's like to lose themselves in a good story." Olivia moved between the shelves with ease, occasionally stopping to touch the spine of a book or two, as if conversing with old friends. Finally, she returned with 3 volumes. "Here's your literary prescription," she said, stacking the books. On the counter, a classic from the United States to reconnect with your roots, a contemporary novel to question your place in the world, and a collection of short stories for those moments when you only have 15 minutes between meetings. Ethan picked up the books, impressed by the thoughtfulness of her selection. "How do you know so much about literature?" "Besides working here, I'm a literature teacher at a public school in the neighborhood," she explained. "And you? What do you do besides wearing expensive suits and looking lost in bookstores?" The question caught him off guard. Usually everyone already knew who he was before he even introduced himself. It was strange and strangely liberating to be just another customer. "I work in real estate development," he replied, opting for the simplified version of the truth. "Ah, so you're one of the people responsible for all these mirrored buildings taking over the neighborhood?" she asked, a hint of criticism in her voice. Ethan felt uncomfortable. "Actually, our company has urban revitalization projects that usually end up displacing local residents and destroying the character of the neighborhood," she finished, though her tone was more provocative than aggressive. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of students. Olivia greeted them enthusiastically, clearly knowing each one by name. Ethan watched, fascinated, as she navigated the shelves, helping the young people find books for their schoolwork, offering personalized suggestions, and occasionally cracking jokes that drew laughter from the group. "They're my students," she explained when she returned to the counter. "We're organizing a community reading project. The idea is to create a space where they can express themselves through literature." "Sounds like an interesting project," Ethan commented, genuinely intrigued. "It is, but it's not easy. Securing resources is always a challenge, and we recently found out that the building where our community library operates has been sold. Soon we'll have to find a new space." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He knew exactly which building she was talking about. It was one of the latest projects approved by his company, "I need to go," he said, suddenly aware of the time. "How much do I owe for the books?" Olivia rang up the purchase, and when their hands touched as she handed him the change, Ethan felt an electric current run through his body. Their eyes met. For a moment that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. "Come back whenever you want to discuss books," she said, breaking the silence. "Or to defend predatory real estate development," she added with a provocative smile. Leaving the bookstore, Ethan found himself smiling alone for the first time in a long while. Olivia was different from anyone he had ever met. Direct, authentic, passionate about her work, and completely indifferent to his social status. In the car on the way to the office, he flipped through one of the books he had bought. A card fell out from between the pages. It was an invitation to a charity soiree, happening that weekend at the community library. Ethan tucked the card into his jacket pocket, knowing his presence there would raise many eyebrows in his social circle. But for the first time in his life, the opinions of others didn't seem so important. There was something about Olivia's world, a world of used books, modest dreams, and genuine smiles, that drew him in more than all the lavish parties and business connections his mother valued so much. The charity soiree was in full swing when Ethan arrived at the community library. He had swapped his usual suit for a button-up shirt and jeans, trying to blend into the relaxed atmosphere. The space, though modest, was brimming with life. The walls were decorated with student artwork, and the air buzzed with music, poetry, and laughter. Olivia was at the center of it all, wearing a simple floral dress that made her look even more radiant than usual. She was coordinating the students' presentations with a mix of authority and warmth that Ethan found fascinating. "I can't believe you actually came," she exclaimed when she saw him, her face lighting up with genuine surprise. "I said I would," he replied, handing her an envelope. "A small contribution to the project." Olivia opened the envelope, and her eyes widened. This is a lot of money," she whispered, trying to hand it back. "We can't accept this." "Please take it. It's for the kids," he insisted, feeling for the first time in his life that his money could do something truly meaningful. Before Olivia could respond, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Ethan Montgomery, what a surprise to find you here." It was Isabella Harrington, the young woman his mother had been so insistent on introducing him to. She was impeccably dressed, looking out of place in the unpretentious setting of the library. "Isabella," he greeted her tense, "I didn't expect to see you here. I came representing my family's foundation," she explained, casting an evaluative glance at Olivia. "And you? I didn't know you were interested in community projects." The condescending tone didn't go unnoticed by Olivia, who subtly straightened up. "Mr. Montgomery has shown genuine interest in our work with the youth," she said, maintaining a professional tone that made Ethan feel a pang of disappointment. "Mr. Montgomery?" Isabella laughed. "Darling, don't you know who he is? Ethan is the heir to the Montgomery Empire. That new building being constructed at the end of the street? It's his company's." Olivia visibly paled, her eyes meeting Ethan's with a mix of surprise and disappointment. "The building that's replacing our library." "Olivia, I can explain," Ethan began, but was interrupted by one of the students calling the teacher to fix an issue with the sound. "Excuse me," Olivia said coldly, walking away. Isabella watched the scene with a satisfied smile. "She's interesting," she commented as if speaking about an exotic curiosity. "Does your mother know you're frequenting this kind of place?" "That's none of my mother's business," Ethan replied more sharply than he intended. The rest of the evening passed in an uncomfortable blur. Ethan tried several times to approach Olivia, but she was always busy with the students or talking to other volunteers. When he finally managed to get a moment alone with her near the end of the event, her reception was icy. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" she asked, organizing books with more force than necessary. "I was going to tell you," he defended himself. "But here, for the first time, I could just be myself, without the weight of the Montgomery name." "Being yourself? And who are you, Ethan?" "The businessman who buys buildings without caring about the people who live in them, or the man who shows up with generous donations to clear his conscience." "It's not like that," he protested. "I didn't even know about this project when the building was bought. And since I met you, I've been thinking a lot about the impact our ventures have on communities. Olivia stopped what she was doing and stared at him. You know what bothers me the most? That I really believed you were different. That you cared about the books, the students, the project, about me. And I do care, insisted Ethan, taking a step toward her. Olivia, you've made me see the world in a completely new way. For the first time in my life, I feel like I can be more than just the Montgomery heir. For a moment, something softened in her gaze. But then Isabella walked by, loudly commenting on how her foundation could revitalize the neighborhood, and Olivia's expression hardened again. You'd better go, she said, turning her attention back to the books. Your friend must be waiting, and I'm sure you have more important events to attend. Ethan left the library feeling the weight of two worlds colliding violently in his chest. He knew Isabella would tell his mother about his presence at the benefit and that it would trigger a series of questions he wasn't ready to face. But for the first time, that wasn't his biggest fear. What truly scared him was the possibility of having lost Olivia's trust before even having the chance to prove he could be more than his last name suggested. The news of Ethan's presence at the benefit reached Eleanor Montgomery's ears before breakfast the next day. As expected, the matriarch called an emergency family meeting at the Montgomery mansion. The grand hall, with its crystal chandeliers and imposing portraits of the family patriarchs, seemed even more oppressive that Sunday morning. Ethan watched his mother pace back and forth, her heels echoing on the Italian marble floor. A benefit at a community library. Eleanor pronounced each word as if it were a personal offense. Ethan, do you have any idea what this could do to our reputation? Isabella Harrington called me early this morning, extremely concerned about your eccentric behavior. Mom, there's nothing eccentric about supporting an educational project, Ethan defended himself, trying to stay calm. Sophia, who was sitting on the couch flipping distractedly through a magazine, looked up with renewed interest in the discussion. Educational, Eleanor laughed humorlessly. Please, Ethan, don't be naive. That teacher is obviously trying to get close to you for her own gain. It wouldn't be the first time someone has tried to use one of my children for money or influence. You don't know Olivia, Ethan protested, his voice hardening. She didn't even want to accept the donation I offered. Oh, of course, the false modesty tactic. Very clever of her. Eleanor moved closer to her son, softening her tone. Darling, you're young, handsome, and most importantly, wealthy. You need to understand that not everyone has the same advantages as we do. Some people will do anything to get a piece of our success. Sophia finally slammed the magazine shut. Or maybe, Mum, there are people who care about things beyond money and social status. Sophia, stay out of this, Eleanor warned. I already have enough problems with your unrealistic artistic dreams. Ethan felt anger rising in his chest. Sophia's dreams aren't unrealistic, and Olivia isn't opportunistic. She's the most genuine person I've ever met. Authentic? Eleanor raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. How can you be sure? Have you looked into her past? Do you know where she comes from, who her family is? I don't need to investigate anything, Ethan exclaimed. Unlike our world of appearances, Olivia is exactly who she seems to be, a dedicated teacher who cares about her students and the community. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of William Montgomery, Ethan's father, entering the room. He walked into the hall with his usual serious expression, followed by an assistant carrying a folder of documents. Eleanor, we need to talk about the new mall project, he said, pausing as he noticed the tension in the air. Am I interrupting something important? Your son has decided to become a philanthropist, Eleanor replied sharply. He's been attending charity events in questionable areas of the city. William studied his son for a moment. Ethan, you know we have our own foundation to handle social responsibility. There's no need to get personally involved in these projects. The foundation, Ethan laughed humorlessly. The one that only exists to improve our public image and secure tax incentives. Dad, for the first time, I'm seeing the real impact we can have on people's lives. Real impact, Eleanor interjected. The real impact we have is through our ventures. We create jobs, develop the city. Develop? Ethan interrupted her. Is that what you call displacing people from their communities? Destroy cultural spaces? To build yet another luxury building? William frowned. Son, you're talking like one of those activists who criticize us so much. Have you forgotten that your entire lifestyle is maintained by these ventures you now condemn? Maybe it's time to question that lifestyle, Ethan replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Sophia stood up, siding with her brother. He's right. We're so concerned with keeping up appearances that we've forgotten how to truly live. Eleanor shot an icy glare at her children. Enough. Ethan, you have responsibilities to this family. I won't allow you to throw everything away over some romantic whim with a public school teacher. It's not a whim, Mom, Ethan responded, heading for the door. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking for myself. And you know what? It's liberating. Leaving the mansion, Ethan grabbed his phone and, ignoring the dozens of messages from Isabella Harrington, opened the photo he had discreetly. Taken during the gathering, Olivia surrounded by her students, all smiling, genuinely happy. That image held more life and meaning than all the photos of social events he had ever attended. His mother was wrong. It wasn't Olivia who had something to gain from that connection. It was him who, for the first time, was gaining something truly valuable. The chance to be authentic, to make a real difference in people's lives, to feel something genuine. And he wasn't willing to give that up, no matter the cost. Chapter 5. Choices and Sacrifices. In the days following the family meeting, Ethan threw himself into his work, trying to find a way to reconcile his new ideals with the responsibilities he carried. During a particularly hectic afternoon, his secretary announced an unexpected visitor, Sophia. "You won't believe what I found out," his sister said, closing the office door behind her. Her eyes sparkled with that characteristic intensity that always foreshadowed trouble. "Sophia, I have an important meeting in half an hour." "Olivia is about to lose not only the library but also the bookstore," she interrupted. "And guess who's behind it?" "Our dear Isabella Harrington." Ethan sat up straight in his chair. "What do you mean?" "Apparently, the Harrington Foundation is buying several properties in the neighborhood. They're planning a big revitalization project. And guess who's providing legal counsel? The law firm Mom always hires." Ethan felt his stomach drop. He knew this tactic well. It was how his family used to operate, buying strategic properties through different companies until they had enough control to launch major developments. "I need to do something," he said, standing up. "You'll have to pick a side, Ethan," Sophia warned. "And this time you can't please everyone." Ethan cancelled the meeting and headed to the bookstore. He found Olivia organizing a new shipment of books, her face showing concern. "We need to talk," he said bluntly. "Now's not a good time," she replied, not looking at him. "It's about the bookstore and the library." That got her attention. Olivia sighed, setting the books aside. "What do you have to tell me that I don't already know? That we're going to lose our space to make way for another luxury development?" "Not if I can help it," he replied, stepping closer. "Olivia, let me help. I can use my influence to—" "Your influence?" she interrupted. "The same influence your family uses to push people out of their homes. No, thank you. Not all changes are bad," he argued. "We can find a middle ground, a project that benefits the community and—" "A middle ground?" Olivia laughed without humor. "Ethan, don't you get it yet? There's no middle ground when it comes to destroying a place people call home. These books," she gestured around, "are more than just objects. They're dreams, hopes, refuges. Every child who visits our library finds here a place where they can be themselves, where they can dream of a different future." Ethan felt the weight of her words. "That's exactly why I want to help. Olivia, you've made me see things differently. For the first time, I understand that I can use my position to do something truly meaningful. And your family. Will they support this sudden shift in social consciousness?" "It doesn't matter," he replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "I'm tired of living up to their expectations." Olivia studied him for a moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why are you doing this, Ethan, really?" "Because—" He hesitated, gathering courage. "Because you've shown me that there's a world beyond appearances and money. A world where people care about each other, where there's purpose and real meaning. And also because I can't stop thinking about you." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. It was Nathan, one of the volunteer teachers at the library. "Olivia, you won't believe this," he exclaimed, oblivious to the tension in the room. "We've secured a temporary space for the library, that old mansion on Maple Street." "The Mendelssohn Mansion?" asked Olivia, her eyes lighting up. "Yes, the owner is a lovely gentleman who was thrilled with our project. He said we can use the space for as long as we need, as long as we help with the maintenance." Olivia hugged Nathan, celebrating the news. Ethan watched the scene, feeling a mix of joy and jealousy. There was a familiarity in the way the two embraced that bothered him. "This is wonderful," he said, forcing a smile. Olivia turned to him, her face radiant. For a moment, Ethan saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Gratitude? Regret? But before he could decipher it, Nathan stepped between them. "Olivia, we need to start planning the move. We have so much work ahead." "Yes, of course," she replied, casting one last glance at Ethan. "Thank you for caring, Ethan, but it seems we've found our own solution." Ethan left the bookstore feeling simultaneously defeated and determined. Olivia might have found a temporary solution, but he knew his family and the Harringtons wouldn't give up so easily. The battle was just beginning, and for the first time in his life he would have to choose between being the son his parents wanted or the man he was discovering he could be. The news about the Mendelssohn Mansion soon reached Eleanor Montgomery. During a lunch at the family estate, she didn't hide her irritation as she discussed the matter with William. "This is unacceptable. That mansion is one of the last historic properties in the neighborhood. How could Anthony Mendelssohn give it up for such an insignificant project?" Ethan, who had been summoned to lunch, remained silent, pushing his food around without actually eating. Sophia, beside him, watched everything carefully. "Actually," continued Eleanor, her tone deliberately casual, "Isabella told me something very interesting about this Marina Santos." Ethan looked up, trying to mask his concern. "And what would that be?" "Apparently, she and Nathan Carter, that volunteer teacher, have a romantic history. They were engaged for 2 years, did you know? They broke up a few months ago, but they remain very close." Eleanor emphasized the last word, studying her son's reaction. Sophia quickly intervened. "So what? Her past is none of our business." "On the contrary, dear," Eleanor replied, taking a sip of wine. "Everything that involves this family's reputation is our business, and Ethan needs to know what kind of person he's getting involved with." "What kind of person?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. "A dedicated teacher who cares about her community?" "An opportunist," Eleanor cut in. "Think about it, son. She barely ends things with one man and then gets close to you. And now, coincidentally, she gets a free space just when she needed it. People always have ulterior motives." Ethan pushed his plate away, completely losing his appetite. "You're wrong about her." "Am I?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Then why don't you ask her about the real reason she broke up with Nathan? Or about the project they were developing together before the breakup?" The way his mother spoke, with that characteristic certainty, sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Eleanor always knew more than she let on. After lunch, ignoring his mother's protests, Ethan headed to the Mendelssohn Mansion. The library move had already begun, and he found Olivia and Nathan organizing boxes of books in the spacious main hall. "We need to talk," he said, approaching Olivia. She nodded, sensing the seriousness in his voice. Nathan shot a concerned glance at the two, but discreetly kept his distance. "Why didn't you tell me about you and Nathan?" Ethan asked as soon. As they stepped aside to a more private corner, Olivia paled slightly. "I didn't think it was relevant." "You didn't think it was relevant to tell me that you were engaged until a few months ago? That you're still working together?" "Nathan and I have a history, yes," she replied, lifting her chin. "But it's over. We remained friends because we share the same ideals, the same love for education and the community." "And the project you were developing together, what happened to it?" Olivia stared at him, surprised. "How do you know about that?" "My mother seems to know a lot about your life," he replied, immediately feeling guilty for the accusatory tone. "Your mother?" Olivia laughed humorlessly. Of course, the all-powerful Eleanor Montgomery, investigating the life of the teacher who dared to get close to her son. Olivia, please, do you really want to know? Nathan and I were developing a technology education project for underserved communities. We had secured support from some companies and were about to implement the project. But then, mysteriously, all the sponsors backed out at the same time. The project collapsed, our relationship couldn't withstand the pressure and what? And now I understand exactly what happened, she finished, her eyes filling with tears of anger. Your family, always your family, isn't it? Destroying dreams, manipulating lives. I didn't know, Raphael defended himself, feeling increasingly lost. Olivia, I swear I didn't know any of this. You didn't know because you never needed to know. You live in your privileged bubble, Ethan. For you, all of this is like an interesting movie, an exciting adventure. But for us, it's our real life. At that moment, Nathan approached, concerned by the heated tone of the conversation. Is everything okay here? No, Nathan, it's not, Olivia replied, wiping away a stubborn tear. But it will be, because now I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Ethan watched as Nathan placed a protective arm around Olivia's shoulders, guiding her away. The familiarity of the gesture, the way she allowed herself to be comforted by him, made his heart ache. Leaving the mansion, Ethan felt the weight of generations of manipulation and power games from the Montgomery family. His mother had managed to plant the seed of doubt, but not in the way she had hoped. Instead of questioning Olivia, he began to question everything his family stood for. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. I found out more about Olivia and Nathan's project. We need to talk. It's urgent. Sophia was waiting for Ethan in her secret studio, a small rented space where she kept her artwork, away from the critical eyes of the family. The place was a perfect reflection of her personality. Colorful canvases covered the walls, brushes scattered everywhere, and the smell of fresh paint in the air. How did you find this place? Asked Ethan, eyeing the paintings that depicted scenes of the city, including one of the Mendelssohn mansion. I have my ways, replied Sophia, rummaging through a folder. Just like I found this. She spread several documents across a table, printed emails, old contracts, and photographs. Remember when Mom started attending those charity events about 2 years ago? It wasn't just for appearances. Ethan picked up one of the papers, recognizing the Harrington's Foundation's letterhead. What is this? Proof that our family and the Harringtons have been working together longer than we thought. They're experts at clearing areas for major developments. First, they buy strategic spots in the neighborhood. Then, they pressure small businesses to sell, either through irresistible offers or other methods. What other methods? Asked Ethan, dreading the answer. Sudden permit cancellations, mysterious issues with inspections, sponsors pulling out without explanation. Sophia paused meaningfully. Like what happened with Olivia and Nathan's project. Ethan felt his stomach churn. Our mother, she really sabotaged their project? Not directly, explained Sophia, but look at this. She showed a series of emails. Isabella Harrington, acting as the family foundation's representative, spoke to every sponsor. Coincidentally, they all do business with Montgomery companies. But why? Why do this to them? Because their project was going too well, replied Sophia. They were managing to mobilize the community, creating a sense of belonging. United people are harder to remove from their spaces. And do you know where the center of their operations was? The same block that Mom and the Harringtons want for the new development. Ethan ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of each revelation. How did you find all this out? Sophia smiled sadly. Remember Dad's assistant? He has a daughter who participates in Olivia's projects. When he found out the sponsors had backed out, he started investigating. He was the one who came to me. Why you? Because he knows I'm the only one in the family who never wanted to be part of this power game, she replied, picking up a paintbrush and twirling it between her fingers. Ethan, there's something else. The Mendelssohn mansion? It wasn't a coincidence that they got the space. What do you mean? Anthony Mendelssohn is being pressured to sell the property. He gave the space to the library as a form of protest to make the sale harder. But it won't last long. The Harrington Foundation is already filing lawsuits claiming the mansion poses a risk due to lack of proper maintenance. Ethan sat down, heavily in a chair. So Olivia was right. Our family really does destroy dreams. Not our family, Ethan. Mom and her strategic alliances, corrected Sophia. And now she's doing it again, don't you see? Isabella Harrington isn't interested in you. She's part of Mom's plan to keep you under control, to ensure the Montgomery Empire keeps running the way she wants. What can I do? Asked Ethan, feeling powerless for the first time in his life. The question isn't what you can do, but what you're willing to sacrifice, replied Sophia. Olivia and her project represent everything our family has always fought against. Community unity, accessible education, valuing local culture. Fighting for this means not just confronting Mom, but an entire system that has benefited us our whole lives. Ethan stood up, walking closer to one of Sophia's paintings. It was a portrait of children reading in a library, their radiant expressions perfectly captured in colorful brushstrokes. When did you paint this? He asked. On the day of the recital, Sophia replied. I went there quietly, wanting to see with my own eyes what had made my older brother, always so controlled, start questioning everything. And what did you see? I saw life, Ethan. I saw real people, with real dreams. I saw you smiling genuinely for the first time in years. And I saw Olivia. She has something special, doesn't she? A strength that doesn't come from money or power, but from something far more valuable. Ethan gently touched the canvas, his fingers tracing the outlines of the painted figures. I need to talk to her. Tell her all of this. Are you sure? This could hurt Mom, the company. Enough of protecting those who only care about profit and power, he replied, his voice steady. Olivia and those children deserve to know the truth. They deserve a chance to fight. When Ethan left the studio, the sun was already setting on the Chicago skyline. In his chest, a new resolution was forming. It wouldn't be easy to face his family, especially his mother, but for the first time in his life, he was certain he was doing the right thing. His phone buzzed with a message from Isabella. Your mother is organizing an important dinner tomorrow. Don't miss it. We need to discuss the future. Ethan looked at the message and for the first time saw clearly the game being played. The future Isabella mentioned wasn't his, but the one his mother had planned. It was time to write his own story. The dinner at the Montgomery mansion was impeccable, as always. The antique jacaranda table gleamed under the light of the crystal chandelier. The family silverware sparkled on the imported linen tablecloth, and the aroma of food prepared by the private chef filled the air. For Ethan, however, everything seemed artificial, an elaborate performance that no longer convinced him. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, William to her right, Isabella Harrington to her left. Sophia had refused to attend, sending a message about an allegedly urgent commitment. Ethan knew it was her way of protesting. Ethan, darling, Isabella was telling me about the wonderful plans the Harrington Foundation has for Lincoln Park, began Eleanor, her calculated smile not reaching her eyes. A true urban revolution. Revolution, Ethan questioned, his voice controlled. Is that what we're calling the destruction of entire communities now? A tense silence fell over the table. Isabella nervously adjusted the napkin in her lap. Son, William interjected, you need to understand that urban development requires sacrifices. It's the price of progress. Progress for whom, Dad? For us, who already have more than we need. Or for people like your assistant's family, whose daughter uses the library we're about to destroy. William paled, his eyes quickly meeting Eleanor's. I see Sophia couldn't keep her mouth shut, said Eleanor, her voice sharp as ice. I always knew her obsession with art would make her a problem. Leave Sophia out of this, Ethan defended. She only showed me the truth that you all tried to hide. How could you? Sabotage Olivia and Nathan's project, pressure sponsors? Use Isabella to manipulate me? Isabella had the decency to look embarrassed. Ethan, it's not quite like that. Not quite like that? He laughed humorlessly. Then explain it to me, Isabella. Explain why your foundation spoke to every sponsor of the educational project. Explain why you're suing Mr. Mendelssohn over a mansion that's in perfect condition. Enough! Eleanor slammed the table, making the glasses tremble. Don't you understand, Ethan? Everything I did was to protect our family, our legacy. That teacher and her romantic ideas about community and education, she'll never understand our world. No, Mother. It's you who never understood her world. A world where people care about each other, where success isn't measured by square footage of developments or numbers in bank accounts. How touching, Eleanor mocked. And what do you plan to do? Abandon everything we've built for generations to play teacher in a community library? Ethan stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. If necessary, yes, but first, I'll do what I should have done from the start. Use my position for something that truly matters. What are you talking about? Asked William, his voice betraying concern. As the vice president of the company, I have access to all documents related to the projects in Lincoln Park, including those that show how you and the Harringtons have manipulated evaluations, pressured property owners, bypassed zoning, laws. You wouldn't dare, whispered Eleanor, her face losing color. Actually, I already have, replied Ethan, picking up his phone. While we were here, Sophia has been in a meeting with investigative journalists. Everything has already been documented and sent to the proper authorities. Isabella stood up abruptly. Eleanor, I need to go. My father will want to know about this immediately. Sit down, ordered Eleanor, her voice trembling with anger. Ethan, do you have any idea what you're doing? You're going to destroy decades of work, important partnerships. No, Mother, I'm saving the soul of this family. You may not realize it now, but there are things more important than money and power. William, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Son, I know your intentions are good, but there are other ways. Like the ones you used in the past, Dad, interrupted Ethan. Sophia also found out about that, about how Grandma tried to stop your marriage to Mom because she wasn't from a traditional family, about how you fought against social prejudice. Eleanor froze, her eyes meeting her husband's. For a moment, something resembling vulnerability crossed her face. It was different, she murmured. No, it wasn't. You were also the outsider once, the person who didn't belong in this world. But instead of using that experience to empathize, you chose to become exactly like those who judged you. Raphael walked to the dining room door, pausing only for one last look at his family. Tomorrow, when the story breaks, you'll have a choice. You can keep denying that there's something wrong with the way you run the business, or you can use this as an opportunity for real change. I've already made my choice. When the door closed behind him, the silence that fell over the dining room was deafening. Through the tall windows, the city of Chicago glowed under the night sky, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside the Montgomery mansion. For Raphael, it was the start of a new journey. For his family, it was the moment to confront long-ignored truths. The next morning dawned with the news splashed across the city's major newspapers. Air exposes real estate scheme involving major corporations. Raphael's phone wouldn't stop ringing, but he ignored all the calls as he drove to the Mendelssohn estate. He found Olivia on the porch, surrounded by newspapers. Her face showed a mix of surprise and concern as she saw him approach. Why did you do it? She asked, standing up. Why risk everything? Because it was time to do the right thing, he replied, climbing the porch steps. Olivia, I'm sorry I didn't realize sooner what was happening, for not stopping them from hurting you and Nathan. She shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. You couldn't have known. And now, your family. My family needed this wake-up call, he interrupted gently. But I didn't come here to talk about them. I came because there's something you need to know. At that moment, Nathan appeared at the door of the estate. Olivia, the reporters are swarming in. We need to decide how we're going to... He stopped when he saw Raphael. Oh, everything is fine, Nathan, said Olivia. Can you give us a minute? Nathan nodded, casting one last meaningful glance at Olivia before heading back inside. Ethan felt a familiar pang of jealousy, but pushed it aside. There were more important things at stake. Olivia, when I first walked into that bookstore, I was lost. I was living a life that wasn't mine, following a script written by others. You showed me there's another path, that it's possible to make a real difference in people's lives. Ethan, please let me finish. He took a step toward her. I know I've made mistakes, that my family has caused a lot of harm, but I also know I can use my position, my resources, for something positive. If you give me a chance, Olivia studied him for a long moment. What if I told you I don't need your help? That Nathan and I are already reorganizing the educational project, that we've secured new supporters? Ethan felt his heart tighten but stood firm. Then I'd say I'm happy for you, and that even so, I'd still like to be a part of it. Not as the Montgomery heir, but as someone who believes in what you're building. A small smile began to form on Olivia's lips. You know it's not going to be easy, right? My mother will have to accept my choices, he finished. In fact, after the allegations were published, she's in no position to interfere with anything. That's what I'm afraid of, Olivia confessed. I don't want to be responsible for destroying your family. You didn't destroy anything, a voice came from the balcony stairs. It was Sophia carrying a thick folder. Actually, you might have saved our family. How so? Asked Ethan, surprised by his sister's arrival. Come with me, said Sophia, entering the mansion. In the grand hall where stacks of books still awaited organization, she spread several documents across an old table. After the story broke, I got an interesting call from the law firm that always worked for Mum. It seems she's not as tough as we thought. What do you mean? Asked Olivia, curious. Years ago, Mom created a parallel foundation, separate from the family business. A foundation focused on education and culture, but it was never activated. Do you know why? Because Grandma convinced her it would harm the main business. Ethan picked up the documents, recognizing his mother's signature. Why did she never tell us about this? Because she was afraid, replied Sophia. Afraid of appearing weak, of disappointing the family. But now she has no choice but to rethink everything. Olivia examined the papers with professional interest. These bylaws, they're impressive. Your mother really thought of everything. Scholarship, programs, community cultural centers, support for local small businesses. And do you know the best part? Sophia smiled. The foundation has its own resources, separate from the Montgomery businesses. Resources that can now be used for something meaningful. Ethan looked at Olivia, seeing hope in her eyes. What do you think? It would be a way to turn something negative into something positive. Olivia bit her lip, deep in thought. We would need guarantees, full autonomy to develop the projects, meaningful community involvement in decisions. All of that can be arranged, Sophia interjected. In fact, I've already started working on the new bylaws, and I think I know who would be perfect to lead the educational initiatives. Nathan, who had remained silent, observing everything, from a corner finally spoke up. Olivia would be perfect for this. No one understands the community's needs better. Ethan noticed the exchanged glances between Olivia and Nathan, realizing for the first time that there was no romance left there. Only the respect and affection of two people who shared the same ideals. And you, Nathan? Olivia asked. Would you stay on the project? Of course, he smiled. Someone needs to keep you grounded when your ideas get too ambitious. The sound of cars parking outside caught everyone's attention. Through the window, they could see several journalists approaching the mansion. I think it's time we made a statement, Sophia said. Olivia, you should speak. Show that this isn't just about accusations and scandals, but about building something new. Olivia looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. I'll be by your side, he said, if you want. I do, she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. But on one condition. We do this the right way, no shortcuts or manipulations. Let's show that it's possible to bring different worlds together without one destroying the other. Ethan felt his heart swell with pride and love. There in that moment, surrounded by dusty books and renewed dreams, he finally found his true place in the world. 6 months had passed since the day of the accusation. The Mendelssohn mansion, now fully restored, gleamed under the spring sun. The ancient walls had been carefully preserved, but the interior pulsed with new life. Modern classrooms, a computer lab, and of course an even larger and more welcoming library. Ethan watched the preparations for the official inauguration of the Living Community Cultural Center, as the project had been named. Children ran through the newly planted garden, helping Olivia organize the final details of the art exhibition Sophia had put together. "I still can't believe we pulled this off," said Sophia, approaching her brother with a smile. She carried her latest painting, an impressive canvas depicting the transformation of the neighborhood. On one side, the coldness of mirrored buildings. On the other, the vibrant life of the community. In the center, the mansion served as a bridge between the two worlds. "None of this would have happened without you," Ethan replied, hugging his sister. "You were the first to see beyond appearances." "Actually," interrupted a familiar voice, "none of this would have happened without all of us." Eleanor Montgomery stood at the entrance of the garden, simpler and more serene than Ethan had ever seen her. The past few months had been tough for her. The scandal, the investigations, the need to rethink everything she believed in. But surprisingly, she had emerged different. Not broken, but transformed. "Mom," Sophia was the first to react. "We didn't expect you so early." "I know." Eleanor took a few hesitant steps toward her children. "But I needed to see this with my own eyes, to see what you've built." Olivia, who was overseeing the arrangement of books nearby, made a move to step away, but Eleanor called her. "Olivia, please stay. In fact, I came specifically to talk to you." A tense silence fell over the group. Ethan instinctively moved closer to Olivia, but his mother raised her hand in a calming gesture. "Don't worry, son, I didn't come to cause trouble. I came to apologize." She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Olivia, I judged you. Unfairly. I let my prejudices and fear of losing control blind me to what truly mattered." Olivia studied the Montgomery matriarch cautiously. "And what would that be, Mrs. Montgomery?" "The happiness of my children, the true meaning of leaving a legacy." Eleanor looked around, watching the children playing, the young people helping with the preparations, the elderly from the neighborhood who had already adopted the garden as their new meeting spot. This is a real legacy, not those cold buildings we've built for years." Nathan, who was approaching with a box of books, stopped when he heard Eleanor's words. She noticed him and gestured for him to come closer. "Nathan, you also deserve my apology. What I did to your previous project was unforgivable." "Mrs. Montgomery," Nathan placed the box on the ground, "the past is the past. What matters is what we do from here on out. And that's exactly what I came to talk about." She opened her folder, pulling out some documents. "The educational foundation I created years ago. I want to turn it into something bigger, an institute that can replicate this model in other neighborhoods, other cities." Ethan and Sophia exchanged surprised glances. Olivia stepped forward, intrigued. "What exactly are you proposing, Mrs. Montgomery?" "A partnership. You maintain full autonomy over this center and future projects. The Institute provides the resources and structure needed to expand. No interference, no manipulation, just support, so more communities can have what you've built here." Olivia looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. "It would be a dream come true to bring education and culture to more people," she admitted. "And there's one more thing." Eleanor hesitated for a moment. "William and I decided to turn the penthouse we have nearby into an art space. Sophia, we would like you to direct it. Complete creative freedom." Sophia covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes filling with tears. "Mom, it's time to support my children's dreams instead of trying to control them." Eleanor smiled softly. "It took me a while to learn that, but it's never too late to change." The sound of more cars arriving announced the beginning of the inauguration. Guests started to arrive. Neighborhood residents, authorities, journalists, all curious to see the project that had emerged from a scandal and transformed into an example of social change. Ethan pulled Olivia to a quieter corner of the garden. "Are you happy?" "More than happy," she smiled, adjusting the plaque that would be unveiled at the inauguration. "I'm hopeful. Do you know what this means for all these children, for the community?" "I do." He hugged her from behind, watching the growing crowd. "It means that sometimes it takes courage to break patterns, to see beyond the obvious. You taught me that." Olivia turned in his arms, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "No, Ethan. We learned together, and we still have so much to learn." In the distance, Sophia began gathering people for the inauguration ceremony. Nathan coordinated the students who would perform a musical presentation. Eleanor chatted with the neighborhood's longtime residents, genuinely interested in their stories and opinions. "Look at this," Olivia whispered. "Who would have thought that a chance meeting in a bookstore would change so many lives?" Ethan kissed her forehead gently. It wasn't chance. It was destiny showing us that there's always hope for transformation. It's never too late to start over, to do the right thing. The bell of the old neighborhood chapel began to ring, announcing the start of the ceremony. Ethan and Olivia walked hand in hand toward the gathering crowd. On the makeshift stage, Sophia prepared to deliver the opening speech, her words filled with emotion and hope. Today, we are not just inaugurating a cultural center, we are opening a new chapter in the history of our city, a chapter that proves it is possible to unite different worlds, different dreams, in pursuit of a greater good. Welcome to the Living Community Cultural Center, a space where everyone is free to dream, learn, and grow together. Ethan squeezed Olivia's hand, feeling his heart overflow with love and gratitude. There, in that perfect moment, he finally understood the true meaning of success. It wasn't about building empires of concrete and glass, but about building bridges between people, about transforming lives and leaving a legacy of hope for future generations.